Liam, just real quick, could you speak like 2 volumes up? For some reason, my volume isn't wonderful on here.
Yes, we will be very loud and project.
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what?
Are you joking?
I'm joking. I'm joking.
You joking that whole time, or do you want me really to be louder?
Be louder.
Okay, cool. Thanks for joining us, you two. We thought it would be interesting. I thought it would be interesting just to hear a little bit about the work that you two do with communitecture, with just permaculture in general. We are a network of different learning centers, different schools that work in interesting ways to do both of the things that you two do. So, last time, Mark, when you escaped into Endor, when Julian facilitated that about 2 years ago, I thought it was great just to hear about your work, and I remember asking very few questions and you just saying lots of great, brilliant stuff. So, can both of you just give like a short intro to who you are and what you do, and we'll take it from there?
Sure. Okay. Well, let's see. I'm just going to kind of pick this up so you can see where we are. So we're in this really glorious office right now that is made of all recycled and natural stuff. You can see that the walls around us are sheathed in about 130 doors, reclaimed doors. And it's basically an old warehouse. The ceiling is insulated and it's covered with stretch fabric membrane, because we get involved with a lot of fabric architecture, but that's where we are. And it's a collaborative office where city repair and communitecture are both located, as well as Julian and our friend Matt Bebo. So they're permaculture designers, and then city repair is this kind of urban activist just organism of relentless creativity. And then communitecture is a creative design collaboration of lots of different community-oriented, very talented designers, all with a very strong commitment to community development and the use of urban permaculture, but mostly in the realm of architecture and planning. So we use design and creativity, and I'd say, you know, there's lots of different ways to boil us down to kind of understand simply what we are, but we're basically constructive activists. Like, we also work and, you know, we protest, we march, we do those sorts of things too, but we feel that it isn't enough to just object to what is wrong. We feel that it's really important and also far more fulfilling and inspiring to be creating the world that we want to live in directly with other people around us. So constantly building community. In fact, I'd say we feel like it's a bit of a trick on us if all we do is try to resist and not create. Then we're just distracted from our creative destiny. So
we're essentially manifesting our own destiny here.
Yeah, that's the project.
Julian.
And do you want to? I just went on for a while. Do you want to say stuff?
Yeah, sure. Well, is it fair to say that everyone in the room is familiar with permaculture?
Yes. Looks like everybody's nodding. Looks like everybody's nodding.
Okay, great. Next question. No, just kidding. So like Mark was saying, Matt Bebo and I, who are the sort of like independent permaculture designer contractors who operate in this office. Matt Bebo is doing educational permaculture work, and I'm doing design work in different assets, specifically in the Portland public school system. Working with middle schoolers, and then doing designs from like small urban lots to 14-acre properties, working with animal systems and water systems, and energy systems. So I do that in the evenings, and then during the day, I work in Portland Public School System as an environmental educator.
Cool.
And then I milk goats at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, he lived in a
Cool.
place called Goat House.
Yeah, we have a couple of goats.
Cool.
So-
So at the Agile Learning Centers that we're all involved in, we do a lot of intentional culture creation, and you know, each school is a small intentional community where everybody's acting as a free agent. You know, there's no grades and tests. Like, people aren't forced to do specific things. So people are acting freely and our kind of governance process is more about creating intentional cultural norms instead of creating rules to govern each other.
Yes.
And so I'd be interested to hear you two talk a little bit about like city repair and, like, Mark, your understanding of intersections of paths and how, like, how the city repair project is creating culture and creating community with interfaces, or just how they do that at all. Like how you see the work you do creating culture and creating community.
Beautiful question. I love the way you started by talking about the idea that your culture would be, your model would be held together by kind of mutual understanding and mutual values rather than rules and regulations. I think the contrast between those two mentalities or modalities is the difference between the village and the empire. You know, when we're talking about anarchism, we're not talking about an absence of we're not talking about an absence of a framework. We're talking about the context being co-created as locally as possible, so that there's no need for a rule book. It's that the values, that everyone's acting constantly on behalf of each other because their lives are so woven together that they're in love with each other. And so they're constantly empowering each other to act on behalf of themselves. It's the most lovely thing. That's the basis of city repair, really. You know, while it's true that we're in the USA, and so, you know, in order to just simply write a check or maintain an account in a bank, you have to have an organizational structure that they recognize. Okay, that's true. And so we've had to take on a nonprofit structure, but we cannot have a nonprofit mentality. And by that, I don't mean that we're avoiding the mentality of scarcity. I'm talking about the fact that a nonprofit tends to kind of guide and regulate itself according to rules and structures created by a bunch of dead old white men, you know? And that never works for anybody, including the dead white men. Like, they're the most unhappy of all, I think. So we have to take on a structure to interface with the rest of the society. But at the same time, if we manage to have, to cultivate friendship, like always meeting around food, always sharing stories, checking in deeply so we kind of keep up with each other's personal story, doing more together than just the work, but the play, spending a lot of time together, just going off to do things, I mean, these days to kind of maintain our sanity, but also just to deepen our affinity with each other. Like, our friendships have to transcend the structure of the nonprofit so that we can keep things in perspective. Because it's so easy in a nonprofit to get myopic. Like, classically, the 501c3, everyone gets all freaked out about, you know, oh no, if we break this rule, then the IRS will come down on us and take away our status. Well, I would rather have the nonprofit take away our status, and then we have to go back to square one to regenerate an organizational structure while we still have the integrity of our relationships with each other. Like, and here's another way to think of this. You know, if you're trying to change the world, but you become the thing that you were trying to change, then you've defeated yourself, and you might as well just you know, walk away and go elsewhere or something. So you have to maintain your perspective. And I would say one of the biggest pitfalls and vulnerabilities for us in trying to maintain this balance and to maintain our trust-based culture has been that our great strength of inclusivity also ends up being to some extent a liability. Like, we're inclusive, so we let everyone come in. We want everyone to have a place to participate. We say, everyone has a place here. But at the same time, there are people who are crazy. There are people who are sociopathic. And if you let anyone come into your culture, especially to your leadership circle, where you're tending your village fire, and they come all the way into the center, and basically they might be a sort of person that thrives off of engendering disruption. Then your open-heartedness has allowed you to let someone in who can just sort of stab you right in the chest. So, as Starhawk says, you must have a narrow gateway to leadership. Make sure you have a structure that enables everyone to become involved, but like a meritocracy, through people, showing their commitment over at least a little bit of time, they kind of earn their ability to sit at the central coremost place of leadership. So they have to prove themselves through action and commitment and dedication. And even if they're cool, even if they come in seeming absolutely wonderful, you still make sure that everyone has to go through a couple of cycles of activity together before they can be part of the core leadership team. So we've had to learn this lesson the hard way over and over again until it finally brought us to our knees, and we realized you can't get along with everybody all in this. Not everyone can play the same role, and they can't all be in the same place. There's people optimize in different areas, and to some extent they self-select, but we all also have to have a mind about this and talk to each other. Be direct communicators, not conflict avoiders. Do the hard work, say the things that have to be said, work things out together, be humble. But I think that foremost piece is what you started off with.
Yeah, totally.
Trust-based culture, and the culture has to be the greatest product of your activism, your own thriving culture.
It's interesting to hear you use so many of the same words that we use in talking about the work that we do. A lot of people were nodding and doing twinkling fingers of resonance while we're talking. Can you talk a little bit about how the work that you do comes out, like on the ground?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're not just designers. As designers, we also have to be, you might say, anthropologists and archaeologists in a way, because the design context we're dealing with, if you only understand it in the most contemporary terms, you're not going to be grounded in a historical awareness of colonialism. When we're designing and trying to address change, especially in the USA and really the whole of the Western Hemisphere, we have to understand the historical context of colonial expansionism and the development of empire, because that's what we're dealing with. We have to realize that whether you're in Asheville or Portland, Oregon, you're in the Roman grid. Some people identify the grid with different sort of cultural origins, but it's taught in architecture and planning school that we are in the Roman grid. Every planner in the country knows we're in a Roman grid, but it's not an issue for them because in design school you're never taught a shred about the political, social, economic implications of living within a violently imposed colonial framework. So for us, the projects on the ground all address in the most locally empowering way the fact that we are regimented and disempowered by design, that the neighborhoods where we live are basically seen as a zone for housing the working class, and they are absent the public gathering places and especially the local organismal structures that would give voice and enable participatory culture to thrive, that would then affect the local environment where we could solve our own problems. But no, instead, from the East Coast to the West Coast, absolutely every neighborhood doesn't even know what the hell has happened to it. We sit there beset by the same problems over and over again. Children disappearing. Nobody even knows it because nobody's talking to each other. In every single neighborhood, there's the most intense. This is actually the case. USA has the lowest number of outdoor gathering places of all first world nations. We have the most isolated population of all people. And we can tell that because we also have the fewest we can see that there's no public squares in almost any neighborhood across the country. So, in our critical analysis and our interest in social justice and our interest in all these other issues like, local currencies, alternative forms of capital, that are based on relationality and sharing what you have. We're interested in all of these different kinds of things, including ecological design and youth engagement and restoring processes of mentorship and stewardship as an inherent part of daily life. We want all those things. And all those things do come together in the process that we call placemaking. Some people think that placemaking is just like, oh yeah, let's put in a bench. Then someone will be able to sit there and we'll call that a place. No, colonialism basically transforms the environment of memory and sacredness of Native people into a commodity by design. So that time, space, and life all become an interchangeable commodity that can just be, sort of traded and exchanged and regulated. So our counterstrike is to say that the world is sacred. And even if we don't even know each other, like we can see that we're human beings and that we have shared this whole kind of continuity over time together and we are one family. So we try to act from that place by saying, all right, well, I must be crazy, therefore, and so are you. So we have nothing to lose by trying out a bunch of new ideas, kind of giving up our entrenched, attitudes and our fear of innovation and just try things out because, why not? The hour seems late for our culture anyway. So we have a very experimental mentality about it. I think we are letting go of needing to be right because, there's nowhere else but really up for us at this point because we've fallen so far from our own senses. So, okay, how this all plays out is that communities are disengaged and they feel like they have no power. So every project we do is a way of practicing power. There are no gathering places in almost any neighborhood, which enforces our isolation. So we bring people together in order to create social environments. But the thing is, unlike the prevalent culture, which is so perfunctory, you go here to work, you go here to consume, you go here to eat, or here to shop or something. We make it so that every single environment recognizes and affirms our humanity. So it's co-generated, and when we're including children, and it's a multi-generational conversation, all these parts and pieces that would otherwise be missing because only a developer is imagining your environment, a developer only is going to pay for what will make them money. But when it's a community involved with a full spectrum conversation, suddenly there are things that emerge out of that you never even imagined were important or even possible. So you give voice and everyone collects the ideas, you listen to everyone, you figure out where you're going to start, what's the most catalytic leverage point where you can apply your energy and you get going. And every single time for me as an architect in this process, it was like, well, that's absurd. Why in the world would we do that? And then we did it, and suddenly it proves for itself why it was so important to do. A bunch of kids in a project that we did said, we've got to have giant suspended leaves representing native trees, all overhead, and then everyone will become inspired. And I was like, this is crazy. This is the silliest thing. It'll never work. And then we did it, and it was mind-blowing, and it brought the entire community together. And of course, we should have been listening to the kids the whole time. So we decolonize not just the environment by restoring gathering places, we decolonize by actually deeply investing our emotions in the welfare and the mutual benefit of everyone else around us,
Liam, can I give you a quick, on the ground example of this?
Please.
Okay, so something that's sort of like distilled all of that together is this really simple activity that's been happening in City Repair as part of their arsenal of weird games that always gets people off their feet and thinking with each other, which is called asset mapping, or otherwise known in the permaculture world as needs and yields analysis. And just on Saturday, there's a large community, a large city called Hillsborough, which is west of us here in Portland, and they would be similar to, I guess you would say, Winston-Salem, but in sort of a smaller, to a smaller degree. Anyway, they have a large Christian community and a large Lutheran community, and they had a community resilience event at the Christ Church of Hillsborough, right? And they brought in a woman from the city named Alice Bush, who runs the emergency preparedness branch of the city, which is kind of an alive topic these days because we're preparing for a large earthquake, whether now or in 35 years. And they brought in someone to talk about water safety and humanure. And then they also brought in someone to talk about permaculture. So here we are, someone from the city and this guy talking about humanure, and this permaculturalist talking to a large, moderately conservative, politically group of Lutheran practicing families. And they sat there kind of dumbfounded, listening to Alice Bush talk about emergency prep, which has to do with community resilience. And they listened to this guy talk about water safety and recycling your poop, which is all about community resilience. And then I was tasked with talking about permaculture, and like Liam remembers, and some of you weren't there, but I jumped into one of Liam's classes and tried to talk about permaculture, and really just like had a loss of words when I was talking to your class. But anyway, I'm glad we're here now doing it. Anyway, one thing that that City Repair has done for many years is its asset mapping. And so here are all of these people who live in a rural area, and traditionally and historically, folks who live in rural areas have a little more hand skills, a little bit more land know-how than most of us living in the urban societies. So I use this asset mapping. And so before the presentation, and what we've done in City Repair before is this asset mapping. So everyone gets a note card, and someone will write on the first side their needs or their yields. So like if someone's a carpenter, they'll write carpenter. If someone's a teacher, they'll write teacher. Or like, I know how to tie knots, or I know how to fix a car. And then on the other side of the card, they'll say things that they need, like babysitting or gardening or plumbing. And then you take 3 to 5 minutes and you have people milling together, trying to find as many connections as humanly possible. And it's a very simple task that's happening here. That's been implemented many, many times throughout City Repair. But then to give it to a community that comes together every Sunday and then disperses in sort of a decentralized way to all of their homes, and they're not necessarily connected because their lands are so far apart, to finally be, for the first time, in the same room, connecting with each other and actually talking with each other and finding out that so-and-so is a carpenter and so-and-so needs carpentry work, and they do all these examples. So that's like sort of one activity that happens before these placemaking sites are implemented around the city.
So, to kind of describe the physical projects, one of our, probably our most famous project is the transformation of street intersections into public squares. And we managed to accomplish the creation of this ordinance that lets that happen several years ago, when we gave a presentation to the City Council of Portland. And we said, okay, look in Seattle and Chicago and Los Angeles, St. Louis, all of these different cities and towns. Look at how high their crime rates are, and look at how few gathering places they have. And then we quoted a few sociologists and said, we've actually designed our own distress. We have designed a context that creates our own problems. Look at all of these places around the world where people's pathways come together, their lives come together in a place. So the way that people actually behave in a really empowered participatory culture is to create gathering place nodes where their pathways come together. So naturally they're constantly flowing together and interacting. They build community just by moving through their own physical space. The difference being they've created their world to serve their needs, and where we live, developers have created this world just to serve their sense of need, which is to get money. So we're isolated by design. If we could transform street intersections into gathering places and enable the local cultures to design and implement these things themselves, then we could engender a restorative effect guaranteed. So they passed the intersection repair ordinance, which allows every neighborhood to transform as many street intersections into public squares as people want to do for free. So we started this off because when you're looking to subvert the colonial grid, the intersection is the most opportune node to re-engender connection and develop a sense of place, not just a sense, but actual vital place of all. So what we've seen coming out of that is the activation of the social culture across the city hundreds and hundreds of times. And as a consequence of that, it's revolutionized our political leadership so that now the political culture of the Tri-County Council, our county of Multnomah, and our city, and all the surrounding cities around us have become more progressive than ever. And so more and more stuff is happening. I mean, the transportation systems are revolutionized, becoming, and it's got plenty of contradictions. Let me just say, there's plenty of paradox, lots and lots of learning curves, lots of imperfection, but the point is everybody's moving and starting to address issues that were just buried under the rug for decades and decades. Like, Portland, Oregon has huge historic issues between people of color and the predominant white culture that now are finally being loudly addressed. But one of the ways that one of the edges that we're working on in city repair is having to do with houselessness. We have managed to transform the political culture to the extent that they are now making things happen that you would never dream were possible in our lifetime. Like every single woman in the streets of Portland is safe and in a shelter tonight. Every single veteran is housed and in a shelter. Everyone who is outside camping is now able to camp without being swept by the police if they will agree not to do drugs and violence and alcohol. And the reason for that, of course, is for the social service providers that are trying to track where people are and get them into housing or provide services to them, they need to be somewhere, at least for a while, so that these people who want to support can find them. So we have like 30 giant villages in the city now. And if we hadn't created Dignity Village back in 1999, we would not be nearly as far along as we are now to be able to deal with the incredible emergency. Like people are flooding to the West Coast from the interior of the country to try to find a more compassionate but also more amenable, environment that isn't so cold. So they're coming. I mean, it's an emergency.
But Asheville is not cold. Asheville is not cold.
That's true.
Okay, I just need to.
They could be going there too.
They could be, yeah.
But all these people are people with value and skill, and they all have connections and talents. And frankly, I want them here, and I love the fact that they are creating villages that are the most participatory, car-free, lightest ecological footprint, where women are immediately safer than they were before. So there's all kinds of reasons. Like I like to stack dysfunction in order to basically convert them into functions. And what's coming out of this is not just that we're making sure that the individuals are safe and they have meaningful, fulfilling experiences day to day, but we're creating a prototype that can transform the whole society.
Totally. I feel like I could definitely talk to you two all day. I know we are already like a little over time. We started late. And we actually have somebody here going back to Portland in 20 minutes. Charlotte's also going to Portland. A bunch of people are actually going to Portland for a conference here in about 2 weeks, or a conference there. A bunch of people here are going to a conference there in 2 weeks. Does anybody here in this room have a question they just want to get in before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm coming to Portland with a team of people representing all different parts of planning in Charlotte. We have someone from the Department of Health, someone from Department of Transit. We're coming to observe a bike camp in Portland and seeing how we can bring that back to Charlotte, make our streets safer and all these kinds of things. But I guess one question I have about Portland is how as a city all these movements interconnected, and like how that voice, like to make these like upper policy changes that seem really impossible in a place like Charlotte. Like how did the community representing a lot of different interests come together to like create these proposals and actually make the changes at that level? Because I'm curious if it, like what about Portland and how and about the culture of Portland, the city itself, either was created that allowed that, or I know I'm not being very articulate.
No, you are. It's great. So we have some really, we've developed some unique civic institutions over time that are now part of that answer. But to go back to the beginning of that, go back to the 60s and 70s, where certain pieces had to fall into place. We're really helped by the fact that Portland was never tricked into giving up the commission form of government like the rest of the country. Most of the large cities of the country have been, their civic infrastructure was transitioned into the strong mayor form of government. And the idea was that everything would become more efficient with only one authoritarian over everybody. But of course, that makes everything way less efficient and way more authoritarian. And then therefore the one accountable leader becomes more and more remote and inaccessible. So we're lucky we have the commission form of government, which means that we have about 5 times more accessibility than the average city. So you might need to transform your political culture, but that's not the only entry point. We're lucky because we managed to get a few key individuals into positions of power. Like there was an absolutely corrupt guy who was the mayor, but we threw him out of office and replaced him with this communitarian that looked totally like Santa Claus, but he was like the most revolutionary character in the history of the city. And he transformed the civic culture as much as he could. So we've had a combination. Well, first of all, the 60s and 70s had a momentum for change. And that's where we spring from. We're the child of that time. We had certain key individuals within a structure that was more accessible. And they made impacts that they could because they were in the executive position. And then out of that came these other cultures, like you might hear about the City Club of Portland. They meet every Friday and everybody goes. They go to listen to speakers and they have all these subcommittees that meet to issue recommendations on local ordinances and initiatives or statewide elections and stuff. So it's an engaging, it's the most powerful kind of political force in the city. From an advocacy point of view, up to a certain point. More lately, the bike culture is almost like this rabid, like monster that you just cannot possibly try to resist because they are so forceful and creative and joyous. Like, I don't say rabid, but they are ferocious and they will not give up. They're like, okay, fine. You won't put a bike lane on Mississippi Avenue. We will have breakfast on every one of the bridges for 3 weeks. You know, I mean, like their counter strikes seem to be absurd, but they're all about like raising issues and celebrating, having food together in unusual places. So there's always wonderful things happening, even if some initiative is getting slowed down or stopped. They'll just go out and occupy public space in some revolutionary way and just not give up that. So I think it's become a very, very inventive culture that is just relentlessly happy and therefore attractive. And yeah, we've got all kinds of problems and contradictions, but it's become so interesting that everybody will think that's the key. Like if you can become the most interesting thing going on that everybody wants to be a part of, whether they're sort of to the left or the right of the spectrum, then you're kind of there.
Yeah.
And everything becomes possible.
Yeah, no, there's a lot in that. Okay, thanks so much for joining us, both of you two. I really do wish we could just talk all day, or wish we lived in the same city so we could talk all year. Yeah, maybe we can continue talking over emails and stuff.
I was gonna say, if I can get your information from Liam and it works out, would I be able to, if I find the time, visit your guys' shop when I'm in Portland? I think we have some downtime.
Totally. Come visit. We can take you around and show you some things.
Cool.
Sweet.
Cool. Thanks so much, gang.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, gang.
Bye.
Yes.
Talk to you more later.
Today.
Bye, Mark. Bye, Julian.
Bye.
Love to see you.
Bye, guys.